Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're having this lesson. My name is Mr. Kanwar, I'm Director of Science, and this is our series of B5 lessons that you are listening to and watching. So this is B5 Lesson 3. This is only for triple students. So if you do combined, you do not have to do this lesson. You can skip on to B5 Lesson 4. Today's title is going to be The I. And again, this is paper 2, topic homeostasis and response. So B5 lesson 3, triple only, the I, and it's the third lesson in our homeostasis and response topic. So for paper 2. Right, let's begin. So as with always, let's start off with a star to get us thinking. So I've got 4 questions for you. And those 4 questions you can write on a whiteboard or a piece of paper, 1 to 4. So question number 1, what are your 5 senses? This is from our previous learning. Number 2, how do you think your eye focuses? So how do you think it focuses? Number 3, what is short-sightedness? Number 4, how is long sight corrected? Okay. Some of those you might not be able to answer. That's absolutely fine. What you need to think about is how do you think, if you know anything about short-sightedness, what does it actually mean? If someone says to you, I am short-sighted, what does that mean? And if someone, like perhaps maybe your grandparents or even your parents, they may be long-sighted. It's particularly common in older people. How is long-sighted corrected? What could you do? Right, I'm going to give you a minute to think about those. Timer is on. Okay, so what are your 5 senses? Let's hope you've got these answers. So, and it depends on how you write these, but either way is fine. So your 5 senses: sense of hearing, that's through your ear, and you've got receptors there. Sense of sight, that's your light receptors in your eye. That's number 2, or whichever order you've done. You've got pressure and temperature receptors, so touch and temperature, you get that in your skin. And then chemical through your nose, i.e. smell, and taste, they're chemical receptors, and that's your sense of taste and smell. So you've got taste, smell, hearing, sight, and touch. But for your receptors, which you may have put down, it is temperature, pressure, sound, light. Temperature, pressure, sound, light, and I've forgotten the 5th one. Chemical, smell. So they're your 5. Number 2, how do you think an eye focuses? Now, most of us hopefully should have a kind of rudimentary knowledge, i.e. you know a little bit about it. And it might be that in your eye, you've got a lens, and that lens, it does something. It gets fatter or it gets thinner, depending on what it does. That's how it would focus. And then, you've got things like, you may have heard the word iris and you may have heard the word pupil. Each of those have a certain aspect in how we see. However, it's the lens that does the focusing. So if you've got something like that. Number 3, what is short-sightedness? I myself I am short-sighted. Short-sighted means you can see things that are close. Okay, that's what it means. Short-sightedness is the ability to see things that are in a short distance. Can you see things far away? No, you can't. Well, you can, but they are blurry. They're not focused. Okay, so you have a problem with seeing distance. Number 4, how is long-sighted corrected? There are 2 ways and you can correct any sort of short or long-sightedness, and that is with spectacles, glasses. I've got them on currently to correct my vision, or I suppose more fashionable these days is laser eye surgery. And it's not necessarily an answer we would give in any GCSE question, but it is something that we need to be aware of, in the fact that many people are now correcting your eye vision through surgery. I think the surgery's got better, so sometimes people are able to, it lasts for a long time. It used to be that you would have to get laser surgery every 5 to 10 years, depending on what you've taken. So there's your answers for our starter. So what are we learning today? Our challenge is to be able to describe the structure of the eye. Common question for triple students. You should be confident in labeling it and describing the functions of the eye. So that's our challenge. Sometimes you'll find them as tick box questions. Sometimes it might be just draw the line to the correct answer, or sometimes they may be just blanks and they just say what is A, B, or C, and so on and so forth. Our Aspire, explain how long sight and short sight are caused. Okay, so how are they caused, and also how are they corrected? So that's what we're looking for. Now, to start us off, I've got a short video, and that explains the structure of the eye. Really difficult to talk about the structure of the eye in terms of, normally we'd do a class experiment. Hopefully you'd get the eye, you'd dissect it, but I'm not able to do that here, but I've got a short video that will explain the eye for you.
The eye is an important sense organ. You're using information provided by your eyes right now to watch this. This is a horse's eye. It has a similar structure to ours. The white outer covering is called the sclera. At the front it's transparent and allows light to enter the eye. This clear part is called the cornea, and through it you can see the back of the eyeball. The sclera is tough. It protects the eye and helps to give it shape. Cut a window in the back of the sclera and you can see the layer below. It's rich in blood vessels. Beneath is the retina. This is the light-sensitive part that receives images. A camera allows us to look straight through the eye. As the hand moves around, you can see how the image on the retina is upside down. Cutting into the sclera releases a clear jelly-like substance. This is the vitreous humour, and it fills the main chamber in the eyeball. Cutting the eye in half completely reveals the lens. It's a clear jelly-like blob held in place by fine ligaments which surround it. The lens in a horse eye is fairly large, but just like a human lens, it's quite firm and elastic. The colour of your eye is determined by a disc of coloured tissue called the iris. In cross-section, the eye looks similar to this. The lens sits behind the cornea and the iris. The hole in the centre is called the pupil. switch on a bright light and the iris expands, making the pupils smaller. The iris regulates the amount of light entering the eye. The retina lines the interior of the eyeball. Light entering the eye is bent by the lens and focused on the retina. The lens does this by changing shape. Remember how elastic it is. Its shape is changed by the surrounding muscle fibres. This thin layer of white tissue at the back of the eye is the light-sensitive retina. Nerve fibres from all parts of the retina pass out of the eye through the blind spot. These fibres form the optic nerve, which carries electrical impulses to the brain and allows us to see an image.
Okay, so that video went through the structure of the eye and showed you various parts of it. Now, what we are going to do is we need to be able to label the eye. Now, there's lots of labels on this diagram. We don't need to know all of them. However, sometimes it's good to be familiar with some of the terms that they use. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each part just to make sure that we've got them. What I'd like you to do is, as I'm going through them and as I'm talking, is if you can make a quick, now if you can get an eye diagram, brilliant. So ask your teacher beforehand that you will need an eye diagram, or go and grab one now, pause the video and go and get one. Alternatively, you can draw this very simply. You don't need to draw all the layers because we're not going to go through all the layers, but I will explain the bits that are important to us and we need to know. So let's start off, and again, you can draw and write as I'm talking. Let's start off at the top. So what we've got here, or in the middle I should say, we've got a lens. Okay, so we've got a lens, that's this part here. That lens can change its shape to focus light onto the retina. Okay, so that's the lens. That's able to, so that's what it's called, and then the function can change its shape to focus light onto the retina. On the lens, you've got suspensory ligaments. Here we are. And they are here. So what you've got is you've got two suspensory ligaments, and they hold the lens in place. Okay, so they hold the lens in place. And then those ligaments are attached to a muscle. So, and that's called the ciliary muscle. So you've got a ciliary muscle, which is attached to the suspensory ligaments, which is attached to the lens. Okay, and the ciliary muscles changes the thickness of the lens when focusing. We know from our previous work, muscles contract. When they contract or when they relax, they will change, or they will tighten or relax the suspensory ligaments. If they tighten it, the lens will change shape, it will become smaller. If they relax, it will get thicker. Okay, so think about it stretching a long piece of spaghetti, for example. So if you were to relax your fingers so say if you hold that spaghetti and you relax your fingers and move them towards each other, the spaghetti will start to get thicker in terms of it will make a shape, and it will kind of make it like a wiggly worm shape. However, if you were to pull it and tighten it, it will get thinner and you'll get the long, thin spaghetti shape. So think of that as your lens as such. Okay, what I'll do is I'll just give you 30 seconds to make sure that we've got those three. Okay, 30 seconds. And what we should have is your lens that can change its shape to focus light on the retina. That's attached to the suspensory ligaments, which is attached to the ciliary muscle. Okay, so you've got those three: lens, suspensory ligaments, and the ciliary muscle, that are all connected. If I'm going too quick for you, not a problem. Just pause the video and then you can catch up. So that part is the lens. Now you can see in front of it, there's this other object, and that object is called the iris. Okay, so that object is called the iris. It's there. And what the iris does is it controls the amount of light entering the eye. Okay, that basically makes the size of your pupil. Okay, so your iris controls the amount of light entering your eye. If you are in a dark space, okay, if you're in a dark space, for you to be able to see, you need to get more light. So your pupil will dilate. Okay, so it would get larger. Dilate just means get larger in a circular fashion in this sense. Okay, so it will dilate. If you are in a space which there is plenty of light, it will contract and the pupil will be really small because you don't want to get too much light in. And the reason being is because it could damage the eye. It's why one of the first things we always tell, particularly small kids, do not look at the sun directly because it's too bright and it will damage your eye. And that's the reason, that's why you should always really wear sunglasses when it's very, very bright. So let me explain that again. So what the iris does is it controls the amount of light entering the eye, and that is basically the size of your pupil. In dark spaces, you will need a larger iris because you need more light. In light spaces, you will need less light coming in because it's really bright, so therefore it will have a smaller pupil, or you will have a smaller pupil. So that's your iris. You also have this liquid in the front, and it's called the aqueous humor. Strange name, to be honest. But when you dissect an eye, that's the first thing you kind of chop into. When you chop into, this liquid kind of pops out. That's the aqueous humor. So that's the liquid in front of the lens. Okay, and then on the outside, as a protective layer, that's got light sensitive receptors, basically, is the cornea. And you need to be able to label that. So the cornea is the part on the outside of the eye. So basically from the lens, from the top of the lens and around the outside. So that's the cornea. So you've got the aqueous humor, which is the liquid in front of the eye, and then you've got the cornea, which is the outside layer of the eye. Now, when you can see that white bit in your eye, and you know everyone has that white bit, and sometimes you can even, now I wouldn't recommend it, but particularly if you're going to put contact lenses, you can actually touch it, and it doesn't hurt or anything, but it's a tough white protective layer. That's called the sclerotic layer. Okay, so that's called the sclerotic layer. It's there at the bottom. I'll just label it now. There you go. And that's the tough white protective layer that's on the outside. Right. For GCSE, we don't need to know about the choroid. However, that is a black layer containing lots of blood vessels. We don't need to know that, but I'm just going to highlight that there and just put an X there because we don't actually need to know that. Now, all the information that your eye collects is sent to the brain via your optic nerve. Favorite question, make sure that you know that. So that's your label for the optic nerve, and you have that at the back of the eye, and that sends the impulses to the brain. So there's your optic nerve. You then have a retina, and that's probably one of the most important aspects of your eye. Now, the retina is a layer inside your eye. It's basically the back of your eye. It contains something called rod cells and cone cells. So rod cells work in dim light, and cone cells detect color and details. Okay, so that's what your retina does. It's one of the reasons why, when I said earlier about your pupil and it being damaged, you damage your retina. And sometimes, on the odd occasion, when you close your eyes really quickly, or you've been in a bright space or a dark space, and you move from light to dark or dark to light, and you close your eyes, you can see like red spots or something in your eye, or you see some movement. That's because your retina is quickly adapting to the situation that you're in. So your retina is a light-sensitive layer. It contains either cone or rod cells. You then got this massive area that is basically liquid, and that's called the vitreous humour. So you had the aqueous humour in front, and then you got the vitreous humour behind, and that's the back of your eye. Now, where you've not got a layer that has rod and cone cells, you've got something called the blind spot. And you can work out where your blind spot is generally, but your blind spot is where your optic nerve attaches to the eye. And at that point, you cannot, there is no ability to see. Okay, there. So that is your blind spot. So they are your areas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give just 30 seconds, but you can pause the video just to make sure that you've got all those labels down. Okay, so don't worry necessarily about the definitions. We'll come to those, and I've got an easier way of checking those. So that's your diagram of the eye. Now, the definitions, really easy in terms of which are the definitions. But what I want us to do, quick progress check, make sure you've got them right. We've got parts of the eye on this side, on the left-hand side of the screen. There we go. And then we've got the job on the right-hand side. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to match them with the definition. So this is each part of the eye, and I want you to match them with the definition. Now, I apologise. It should be, that should say tough, and that should say ciliary. But anyway, regardless of the few errors in spelling, what I'd like you to do is match the two sections. So part of the eye with the job. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. There we go, 2 minutes. If you get stuck, don't worry about, just look back at your diagram, but try and do it without any help. Okay, so hopefully you've had enough time to do that. So what we've got lens, sclera, which is a sclerotic layer, pupil, ciliary muscle, suspensory ligament, retina, iris, cornea, and the optic nerve. And then we've got jobs, transparent region at the front of the eye that allows light to reach pupil, hold lens in place, controls the size of the pupil, contains receptor cells that are sensitive to light, focuses light to produce an image on the retina, tough white outer layer of the eye, changes the shape of the lens, sensory neuron that takes message from eye to brain, and hole at the front of the eye that allows light to pass through it and reach the cornea. Let's start at the bottom actually. So the hole at the front of the eye that allows light to pass through and reach the cornea is the pupil. Okay, so there we go. So that one matches with that one. The sensory neuron that takes message from the eye to the brain would be your optic nerve. Changes the shape of the lens. So if you remember, the thing that actually changes the shape is the ciliary muscle, because remember the muscle contracts and relaxes. That's the only thing that can change. The tough white outer layer, sclera, that's that one, focuses light to produce an image on the retina. Now the only thing that allows things to focus is your lens. So hopefully you got that one. Contains receptor cells that are sensitive to light. Now that's at the back, so that would be your retina. So that one will be that one. And then you've got controls the size of the pupil. That would be your iris. So controls size of the pupil would be your iris. Holds the lens in place. That would be your suspensory ligaments. So there we go. And then the last one, transparent region at the front of the eye that allows light to reach the pupil. So that's the first layer. That would be your, trying to choose a colour, that would be your cornea. So hopefully you've managed to match those. If you haven't managed to match those, again, pause the video, make sure that you've got those right, because you need to make sure that you know the part of the eye and its job. Okay, so that's the first part of this lesson in terms of describing the structure of the eye. Again, just want a quick check. So I'm only going to give you a minute. All I want you to do is name the parts, as it says in the question, name the parts A, C, F, and G. So A, I don't want all of them labelled. So A, C, F, and G. 30 seconds. Just have a quick, place them down on your board or on your sheet of paper. A, C, F, G. Let's see if we can get them right. Okay, I know I didn't give you that much time on it, but hopefully you managed to get enough time. So A, which is here, is the retina. My writing, not so great, but anyway, it's the retina. C, the optic nerve. Okay, and these are classic examples of questions that you would get in the exam. G, the lens. Okay, and F, the cornea. Okay, they're your four. Now, in terms of functions, I know you probably didn't have enough time, but functions we've just done before. Cornea allows the light to travel through to the pupil. The lens is the focusing of the light. The retina basically records the information that comes through. So it has cone cells and rod cells that detects the light. And then the optic nerve sends the impulse from the retina to the brain. So you can create an image. So let's move on to something called accommodation. Now, accommodation is a process of changing the shape of the lens to focus on near or distant objects. This aspect is it's probably a bit more difficult in terms of some of the questions. However, the answers are always the same. It's one of those GCSE points that sounds complicated, but it's actually fairly straightforward. And once you know what to do when you are focusing on nearsighted objects, the opposite is true for distant objects. So if you want to focus on something close, so say for example you are sat in front of you, you're sat on a computer and you're focusing on that computer, that's a near object. You're not talking about something that's far away. So if you focus on a near object, what happens? The ciliary muscles contract as I'm doing this, you should write this down as bullet points. So to focus on a near, I've done this as exam style notes. So near object focusing, the first thing that happens, ciliary muscles contract. Once they contract, so if they contract, the suspensory ligaments loosen. Okay, so they loosen. The lens is then thicker and refracts light rays strongly. Okay, so the ciliary muscles contract, the suspensory ligaments loosen, and the lens is thicker and refracts light strongly. Then for a distant object, the ciliary muscles relax, the sensory ligaments are then pulled tight, and then the opposite happens. The lens is then pulled thin and only slightly refracts light rays. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 1 minute to jot that down. Okay, you need to be able to state those points. Most of the time it is a 4 marker. Okay, so hopefully you've had enough time. Again, if you've not had enough time, just pause it. So just to reiterate, they are exactly the opposite. So if you remember what happens to a near object, okay, then the opposite is true for a distant object. So that's why it's always good. Just make sure that you know either near or distant, but you know that bit well, and then the opposite is true. So to near object, ciliary muscles contract, suspensory ligaments loosen, the lens becomes thicker, and refracts the light rays more or strongly in this case. Okay, and then the distant object is exactly the opposite. Relax, pull tight, pull thin, and only slightly refracts. And they're your 4 points. It could be a 4 marker quite easily. So that's accommodation. Now, what about defects of vision? So we know that the eye converts light rays into nerve impulses. In your eye, the real inverted image is focused by changing the shape of the lens. Now, in the starter, I spoke about long-sightedness and short-sightedness. If you've got long sight, it is called hyperopia. Okay, hyperopia. A person cannot see near objects. That's what it means. It's strange because you think long-sighted. Sometimes some people think long-sighted, oh, you can't see long. No, long-sighted means that is what you can see. So you can't see things that are close. What do you need? Spectacles, glasses, with a lens that is convex. So you have a convex lens. So you need to be able to state that point. So these 2 points, 1 and 2, quite important. I'd write them down as they are. So when you've got long-sightedness, which is hyperopia, even I can't say it properly, a person cannot see near objects, and you need to use a convex lens. If you've got short-sightedness, myopia, which a lot of people do have, particularly when they're younger, it's mainly short-sightedness, and as you get older, it becomes more and more long-sighted. That's because of the muscles not being able to contract and relax as well as they should be able to. So a person cannot see distant objects. It's corrected by a concave lens. Okay, so long-sighted, convex, short-sighted, concave. Give you 30 seconds to get that down. There we go, long-sighted, convex, short-sighted, concave. Okay, so those are your 2 points, and that's how you fix defects of eyesight. Okay, so long-sightedness and short-sightedness. Okay, so that's a real whistle-stop tour of the eye. What I want us to do now is I want to show you some real exam questions that relate to everything that we've done so far. So, question 1 is worth 4 marks, and you can see that there's an image. So figure 1 shows a reflex in the iris of the human eye in response to changes in light levels, and we spoke about this earlier. So here you go, you've got A and you've got B. You can see that the pupil there is labelled and then the iris is labelled. Describe the changes, okay? So the word describe, I'll highlight there in the yellow box. Say what you see or say what something is like, so it's kind of spot the difference. Describe the changes in pupil and iris going from A to B in figure 1. And then what I want you to do, explain how these changes occur. Okay, so explain how these changes occur. Refer to the changes in light level in your answer. So explain, give a reason why, describe, what does it look like. 4 bullet points, 4 marks. I'm not going to give you 4 minutes, which I would normally do. I'm going to give you 2 minutes, but you can pause the video if you wish to give yourself 2 extra minutes. So you've got 2 minutes to jot down that question. It's a 2-part question. So question 1 and there's a question 2. So 2 minutes for this part. Okay, so hopefully you've got your answers for question 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the answers at the end. There's another question that I'd like us to go through. So question 2. Some people wear glasses to improve their vision. Figure 2 shows light entering the eye in a person with blurred vision. That's there. Figure 3 shows this condition is corrected with glasses. Okay. Compare figure 2 and figure 3. Explain how the blurred vision is corrected. So explain, give a reason why as the thing happens, use connective like because. So explain how that is corrected with that and look at what's happening. Okay, look at what's happening in the differences in the different images. What I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to give you 1 minute, so half the time. If you want to pause it, you can have more. But see if you can have a go at that question. Let's move that out of the way so you can actually see. Okay, so hopefully you got some answers. So let's have a look at what the examiners wanted. So question 1. What you can see is the pupils have dilated at B. So if you go back to that image, the pupil got bigger, so we say it's become dilated. Why has it become dilated? Because there's low light, or it's in a dark space, or it's dim light, whichever one, it doesn't matter. Okay, so those are true in there. Now what happens is it's because the muscles in the iris have relaxed. Okay, so the muscles in the iris has relaxed and the radial muscles contract. Now you can kind of see that from the iris itself. Now I've not specifically gone through that, I will admit. I've not specifically gone through that, and the reason why I haven't is because I wanted to go through it now. So what you've got is in the iris you've got circular and you've got radial muscles. In low light, the circular muscles relax and therefore they make it bigger. The radial muscles contract. Okay, so by doing that, it allows more light to come in and it gets larger. Okay, the opposite is true in bright light. So in bright light, the circular muscles will contract and the radial muscles will relax. That's all to do with the pupil. So what I want us to do is your final set of notes here, and I'll give us 30 seconds to do that, is you can jot down pupil size, low light, pupil size, bright light, and then just put circular muscles relax and radial muscles contract. I'll say it again. So I'll give you 30 seconds. So little subtitle, pupils in low light. That's your subtitle, pupils in low light. And then 2 bullet points, really simple. Circular muscles relax, radial muscles contract. That's low light. Okay, so I'll say that again. Pupils, low light levels, or dim light. Circular muscles relax, radial muscles contract. And then another 30 seconds for pupils in bright light. So that's your next subtitle, pupils, bright light. Circular muscles contract. So it's the opposite, remember. So circular muscles contract and radial muscles relax. So I'll say that again just before the buzzer comes. In bright light, so bright light, circular muscles contract and radial muscles relax. Okay, so that's what happens there. And part B, what did figure 2 show? Well, it showed myopia where the light does not focus on the retina. And in figure 3, and actually they'll just allow refraction, to be honest. And in figure 3, the lens bends the light so the light focuses on the retina. Basically, all you're telling me is that if you go back to that diagram, and I'll flick quickly back. Oh no, I can't click back. Anyway, if I wanted to flick back, if you look at that diagram, you can flick the video back. The focus where the 2 lines crossed each other was before the retina. So it doesn't focus on the retina. What does the lens do? It makes sure that the light focuses on the retina after. Okay? They were tough questions. They were probably quite late on in the exam. You know, you're looking at grade 6, 7. That's what you're looking at with those sorts of questions. And remember, with triple, half marks gets you a grade 7 pretty much. So if you manage to get 3 out of 6, you're pretty much on the way to getting that half marks. They were tough questions, I will admit. Okay, so that's the end of the I lesson. So that's lesson 3, the I. Thanks for joining me for this lesson today. Remember, this was a triple only lesson. The next lesson we will move on in B5 we're looking at hormones. Okay, so bid you farewell and I will see you next time. Goodbye.